Robinson did not receive a warm welcome. From Baltimore to Louisville, fans yelled racial slurs at him. In Indianapolis, he was kept from a game because a local law prohibited competition between races. Pitchers threw at his head to knock him down. You never saw anything like it, one of his teammates said. Every time he came up, he went down. In spite of this constant hostility, Robinson won the league batting title, and the Royals won the International League pennant. After Robinson's successful year in the minor leagues, people began to wonder if he would be promoted to the Brooklyn Dodgers. But most of the baseball world attempted to block Robinson's promotion. In a vote of the 16 baseball team owners, 15 voted against Robinson joining the Dodgers. Branch Rickey was the only one to vote yes. Here's Jackie as he's congratulated for slugging a home run in his first game as a Montreal Royal. Baseball Commissioner A.B. Happy Chandler, however, sided with Rickey and overruled the vote. Commissioner Chandler approved Robinson for the major leagues. One of Robinson's biggest challenges would be winning the respect of his teammates and opponents. Several players stated publicly that they thought Robinson wasn't good enough for the big leagues. Dodgers star Dixie Walker and Eddie Stanky circulated a petition protesting Robinson's presence in the Dodgers training camp in 1947. When Rickey heard about it, he called the white players into his office. He told them that Robinson was playing for the Dodgers whether they liked it or not. If anyone didn't like it, Rickey promised to get rid of them, not Robinson. Other teams also tried to stop Robinson from wearing a major league uniform. Players for the St. Louis Cardinals tried to organize a league-wide strike to protest integration. National League President Ford Frick responded by threatening a lifetime ban from baseball on anyone participating in such a strike. This is the United States, he said, and one citizen has as much right to play as another. Ford Frick, president of the National League. Finally, opening day arrived. After weeks of protests and controversy, Jackie Robinson wore the Brooklyn Dodgers uniform and became the first African-American player in the major leagues. His debut was not spectacular. He failed to get a hit in his first game, but his mere presence on the field was celebrated as a victory by millions of African Americans across the nation. It took several games before Jackie began displaying his athletic skills. His batting average stayed low, and he felt increasing pressure to produce. White fans screamed insults at him, pitchers threw at his head, and his family received violent threats in the mail. Robinson later wrote in his autobiography, "I had to fight against loneliness, abuse, and the knowledge that any mistake I made would be magnified because I was the only black man out there." One team, the Philadelphia Phillies, treated Robinson viciously. During a 3-game series, the Phillies and their manager, Ben Chapman, never stopped shouting abusive, racist insults at Robinson from the dugout. It is not unusual for baseball teams to try to distract the opposing players, rookies especially, by shouting foul language insults at them. But the Phillies were especially nasty to Robinson, and Jackie had promised Branch Rickey that he would not respond to this treatment. The author of this letter threatened to kill Robinson when the Dodgers played Cincinnati's Crosley Field. It took several weeks before Robinson played up to his potential. Here he's caught in a rundown by the Chicago Cubs. Finally, during his last game of the Phillies series, Eddie Stanky became fed up with the barrage of insults. He shouted at the Phillies dugout, "Why don't you yell at someone who can answer back?" It was an important moment because Stanky had been one of the Dodgers who had organized the spring training protest against Robinson. When the rest of the Dodgers saw Stanky stand up for Robinson, they all began to treat him as their teammate. Robinson's performance gradually improved. With his lightning-quick base running and his daring, energetic playing style, the Dodgers and the rest of the league soon recognized that he definitely belonged in the majors. Robinson finished his first season with an excellent .297 batting average. He led the Dodgers in home runs with 12 and stole a league-high 29 bases. He was named the National League Rookie of the Year. That year, the Dodgers played the New York Yankees in the World Series. Although the Dodgers lost, Robinson later said that playing in the series was one of his greatest thrills. Jackie Robinson's successful rookie season sent ripples of change throughout baseball. Larry Doby, a slugger for the Negro League, broke the American League color line by playing for the Cleveland Indians in 1948. The Dodgers then signed Roy Campanella, formerly of the Baltimore Elite Giants. Campanella went on to become baseball's best catcher before he was crippled in an automobile accident. This is Jackie Robinson right here, and he developed his reputation as a daring and brilliant base runner. Here's Jackie Robinson with his wife, Rachel, and they're presented with a new car in honor of his Rookie of the Year award. Legendary entertainer Bill Bojangles Robinson presents Jackie Robinson with the car. Jackie Robinson himself became the biggest star. He won the National League batting title in 1949. He played for the Dodgers for 10 years, and by 1950, he was the undisputed leader. That year, his salary was $35,000. No Brooklyn player had ever earned that much. Ford Frick presents Robinson with a 1949 MVP award. And here is how Jackie Robinson opened the door. He opened the door for all of these people to come through. So these are the first African Americans that crossed the color line. But who was first, everybody?
Jackie Robinson.
Yeah, that's right. As Jackie Robinson's fame grew, people began viewing him as a spokesman for other African Americans. That sometimes put him in difficult positions. He was drawn into a dispute with civil rights leaders that said that African Americans should not fight in the United States military because the government did not support civil rights for blacks. Robinson eventually traveled to Washington to tell Congress that he and many African Americans disagreed with Robinson. Jackie and Rachel arrive in Washington, D.C., where Jackie testified in 1949. As Robinson grew older, his baseball skills began to decline. By 1959, he was not in the starting lineup every day. The Dodgers made the World Series, giving Robinson one more chance to shine. His batting average went down to .256. In the first game, Robinson did something that sparked his team. Standing on third base, Robinson charged down the line and stole home base. It was a daring move for such an important game. Even though the Dodgers lost the game, Robinson had inspired the team, and they went on to win the World Series. It was the first championship in the team's history. So the first championship for the Los Angeles Dodgers was when Jackie Robinson led the team. Jackie Robinson's thrilling steal of home plate inspired the Dodgers to win their first World Series championship. After years of frustration, they finally defeated the New York Yankees in 1955. You can see it right here. Here he's sliding. Here he gets it. And they try to tag him, but he's in. He made it. Still, Robinson knew that his baseball career was winding down. He began to prepare for retirement. Along with the rest of New York, Robinson was shocked when the team announced in 1957 that it was leaving Brooklyn for Los Angeles. Then the Dodgers traded Robinson to the Giants, but Jackie Robinson felt too much allegiance to the fans in Brooklyn to play for another team. Rather than play for the Giants, he retired from baseball. Once his playing days ended, Robinson was determined to help change society for the better. He took a job as vice president of community relations with a coffee company called Chock Full o' Nuts. He insisted that he be involved with the company's operation, not just a figurehead. He also headed fundraising efforts for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. He helped to launch New York's Freedom National Bank and to establish the reputation for fairness towards minorities. Robinson helped it become one of the largest African American owned banks in the nation. Already employed by the Chock-full o' Nuts coffee company, Robinson decided to retire from baseball. And right here we have some more pictures. After retiring from baseball, Jackie Robinson was a visible and outspoken activist for African Americans' civil rights. He participated in many protests for fair wages and workers' rights, and spent hours talking with young people. Robinson also found time to be with his wife and children. In 1962, Robinson was elected into baseball's Hall of Fame. Not only had he been the first black player in the major leagues, he became the first black man to enter the Hall of Fame, baseball's greatest. But in his middle age, Jackie Robinson also experienced loss and sadness. Branch Rickey, whom Robinson had grown to respect greatly, died in 1965. In 1968, his mother died, tending her garden in Pasadena, while tending her garden. And his son, Jackie Jr., returned from the war in Vietnam and developed a drug addiction he never overcame. The young man died in a car crash in 1941. Branch Rickey congratulates Jackie and Rachel Robinson at Robinson's Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Robinson throws out the ceremonial first pitch at the 1972 World Series. This was his last public appearance before he died of a heart attack. At the same time, Robinson's health was failing. In 1972, 25 years after he broke the color line, Robinson was honored with a ceremony before the first pitch of a World Series game. By the 1970s, Major League Baseball was so fully integrated that more than half of the players were African American or Latino. But team managers, coaches, and front office executives still were mostly white. Robinson addressed the crowd that night and said, "I will not be satisfied until I look over at that dugout and see a black manager leading a team." Robinson never lived to see that day. He was suffering from diabetes and heart disease, and his eyesight was nearly gone. Soon after he was honored at the 1972 World Series, Jackie Robinson died of a heart attack at age 53. Eventually, African Americans would manage Major League Baseball teams, and thanks to Robinson's example, they also had broken down barriers in other sports. When Robinson began playing for the Dodgers, the most professional and college sports were still segregated. But in 1951, Chuck Cooper of the Boston Celtics became the National Basketball Association's first African American player. In 1958, Althea Gibson became the first top-ranked African American tennis player. And in 1963, Arthur Ashe became the first African American to represent the United States in the Davis Cup competition. At Robinson's funeral, pallbearers included basketball legend Bill Russell and Dodgers pitcher Don Newcombe. Observing at far left are Roy Campanella in the wheelchair and Chicago Cubs slugger Ernie Banks, fourth from the left. And here we see some other players that were breaking the color line. This is Arthur Ashe, and this is Chuck Cooper. Became the first African American player in the National Basketball Association, the NBA. We don't talk about Chuck Cooper very much. He's sort of a name not many people know. All right, just a couple more pages, guys. In the decades after Jackie Robinson broke baseball's color line, the civil rights movement gained momentum. The movement was spearheaded by Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr., fourth from the left, right here. In the years after Robinson broke the color line, African Americans made great strides in securing their rights in American society. In the 1954 case Brown versus the Board of Education, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that public schools could not be segregated. In 1955, an African American woman named Rosa Parks refused to give up her bus seat in Montgomery, Alabama. Her action led to a highly publicized and successful boycott of Montgomery buses organized by Martin Luther King Jr. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, King spearheaded the revolutionary civil rights movement, which helped reverse countless racist, segregationist laws in the United States. The historic Civil Rights Act of 1964 outlawed segregation in public places and established fair voting rules for all races. Here's Jackie Robinson one more time. He cleans out his locker after playing his last game as a Brooklyn Dodger. So that was the last picture of him as a professional baseball player. Each of these events was a tremendous stride for civil rights in America, but one of the first steps in the civil rights movement was taken by Jackie Robinson in 1947. When he stepped onto the field in a Brooklyn Dodgers uniform, he was walking a path no African American ever had been able to travel. The courage he showed in that moment and throughout his life changed American society forever. And here's the glossary with all the important words, okay, that we learned. Brooklyn Dodgers, color line, commissioner, court martial. Okay, and here's the timeline. Okay? From Jackie's birth in 1919 to Jackie's death in 1972. Y colorín colorado, este cuento se ha acabado. Thank you guys.